Good morning, Steelers fans. I am Neal Coolong. You are listening to the New Standard Podcast here, 9:20 a.m. Central Time, coming at you live from beautiful outside Minneapolis on a gorgeous late June day, just as the garbage truck goes by. Could not have timed that any better. If you can hear that, you have a really sensitive speaker. Lance Williams, our hero, our leader, is indisposed this upcoming 4th of July weekend. My contact within the CIA tells me that he is somewhere in Western Pennsylvania. I am not allowed to know any more than that, but we can assume from that he is still out on assignment somewhere, but he's certainly held down the fort up to this point, and it's probably about time that I start carrying my weight within the legendary show. Again, you are listening to the New Standard Podcast. I am Neal Coolong, and I am a solo host today. Considering we are at the dead period of the NFL calendar, this is the point of time that people such as myself working in media really scrape the bottom of the barrel to find anything to come up with that people want to engage with, want to discuss, want to gnash teeth and scream about on social media. Ideas are kind of tough to come by, not going to lie. One of the most standard, new or otherwise, standard cliches within this business is the Q&A, which is what we're going to do today. However, I've added a twist to this. I have sent out questions far and wide from anybody within my social circle to ask anything, and it is my intention to not just answer those, but answer yours as well. Please chime in. You can do that in the comments. I will try to jump between StreamYard, our streaming platform, and YouTube, where I believe are hard to do, consider the YouTube show is live and it's kind of hard to juggle between them. But I appreciate your support. We're going to get through this. No, this is a lot of fun. I personally enjoy this time of the year. I like what ends up happening among fans. This is kind of the point where you get perhaps irrationally excited about a season. We'll laugh about it later on. The things that will happen will not be the reasons we discussed in late June. But at the same time, I fall for it every year. If I'm not excited about a season, I get excited about this time of the year. Right around now is when players start to seem a lot better. You start getting into the he could be good logic, just give him a chance logic, all the things that probably don't have a strong foundation behind them. But I'm going to start this off by giving you my primary reasons to be excited about the Steelers in 2023. Starting off, I will acknowledge my past. I have been down on this team leading into the last two seasons. And to some degree, I feel that I was justified in doing that, certainly at the time, but my predictions came probably closer to true than false. One playoff appearance, yet another humiliating loss in that playoff appearance. They came very close to qualifying last year after a bad start. The Steelers this offseason, in concert with past off seasons, have put together what I feel is the best roster that they have had in the last probably 5 years heading into training camp. If nothing else, we cannot say the Steelers have not addressed to some degree the biggest needs that seem to be kind of a consensus thought among fans that they had. What that means is very little to the team. I don't think they really care for our approval, but the reality is the holes that they had were pretty glaring, and to the point where 80% of the fan base can agree this is a major problem. It needs to be fixed. They went out and did it. I don't know, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I don't know if the Steelers have made more significant moves along their offensive line in one offseason the way they did now. The addition of Broderick Jones, aka Brojo, for this show from now on at 13 overall. Was it 13 overall? I don't even remember where exactly he was picked. They obviously traded up. That's the first tackle this team has taken since 1996. He has the most potential of any tackle that they've ever drafted. And that is not hyperbole. If you watch him play, you see an athletic marvel, easily the most athletic tackle they've had. His natural ability alone has gotten him a top 15 draft pick within the NFL. And thank you for that. 14th overall. That seems like it should be way higher. Maybe that's just because I felt that he was going to go a lot higher than he did. He also has the character and the work ethic, from what we've heard, to back up the idea that while it probably won't be his rookie year, it's not going to be long until this guy is a monster in the NFL. And you already see it in the ground game. You see how aggressive he is in quick game passing, in outside stretch zone runs. He gets downfield and he looks to punish people. And that's going to be a strong factor, a strong component of the Steelers' running game over the next, as far ahead as we can project, 2 years maybe. Let's go back to the bye week last season. This is getting into why I'm so excited. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't pass the ball. They couldn't protect. They didn't do anything on offense. They were legitimately next to Denver, who was maybe the worst offensive team we've seen in the last 10 years. The Steelers were the worst offensive team in football. And that's, again, also not hyperbole. They were really, really bad offensively. Over the bye week, you maybe get a little healthier. I know everyone wants to lean on that as far as Najee Harris is concerned. It seemed more like a complete top to bottom evaluation of what was going wrong with the team up to that point. Probably the biggest thing that they came out after the bye and started doing was running inside zone, a concept that they're not familiar with, but they've jumped between inside zone, gap, with some outside zone and some power over the last couple of years. Previously, and I'm talking 6-7 years ago, think the Le'Veon Bell era, they ran a lot of inside zone because Le'Veon Bell is a really good inside zone running back, and they blocked very well to that scheme. This was a group that was brought in largely with the idea that they were going to run gap. Without getting into the technical details a whole lot, gap is a lot more simplified. So if you have a group of new players coming together with a new coach, the way the Steelers did on their offensive line for pretty much the last 3 seasons, gap makes a lot of sense, except this unit could not, they did not run well in gap. That's a matter of the running back. We're not going to prop Najee Harris up on a pedestal and say that he's the greatest running back in the game if they could only block for him. If that's all a guy needed, he wouldn't be a first-round pick, or running backs would completely dominate the NFL on a year-to-year basis. Those things aren't happening. It's a combination of a lot of things, but your run blocking, your scheme, your ability to get guys doing what they need to do 95+% of plays is more important than the overall skill of your running back. They were not blocking well for a running back that was not seeing what room was there for him. I put it on equal parts. There's plenty of issues with Najee Harris running in gap last year, if you look back at the film. They changed it to inside zone, and Najee Harris went from, frankly, a substandard running back to a pretty good one in the matter of one game, just that bye week. Everyone wants to put it on the idea that he got healthy. Health helps, but I don't think the injury that he had that was causing him to be below standard for half the season went away in a couple days. He still played less than 100%, like every NFL player does, but he saw the field better after getting the ball. His vision improved tremendously within his own scheme. What's the point of this? Broderick Jones, for one, can block within that scheme. Inside zone, combination blocks on the outside, the tackles shooting out, reaching a second level to try to spring a player. He has the athletic ability to do that at you can't even compare physically Broderick Jones to Dan Moore. Not that Dan Moore is not a pretty good athlete. He is, but he's not a top 14 pick. He's not Jones is a super freak. I mean, he's just an incredible athlete. You watch him move, look at the way he's built. He's not a normal dude. He's going to make an impact in that scheme, in that game. He's not the one to be really excited for this season, though. This is point number 2. Isaac Seumalo couldn't be a better fit for what they're trying to do to run the ball. This is reason number 2 why I'm really excited. What I found really interesting this offseason is the Steelers went out and signed Nate Herbig from the Jets, gave him a 2-year, $4 million deal. That's not obviously a high-level starting contract, but it's not a backup contract either. There was some thought when they signed him that he was going to be a starter. But let's read between the lines. To get Herbig to sign that contract, let's just assume he's got something of a market, because to be honest with you, Herbig's good too. Herbig fits this scheme well at the same time. Did Herbig sign with the Steelers because he wants to play for the Steelers, because he wants to buy into the myth and lore of the team and wants to play for Mike Tomlin and blah, blah, blah? Or was that the team that was going to give him the best opportunity to start? I'm going to guess it was the latter, but they probably told him, we don't know yet. We're going to pay you this. That price isn't going to change. We might bring in a starter. We might draft one. We don't know yet. Because I think, especially with the connections between personnel man Andy Weidel and the Eagles, where Seumalo was playing, I think they wanted to go get him, but they weren't sure they were going to. So they signed Herbig as insurance, essentially, against that. They ended up getting Seumalo, who is a perfect schematic fit for what they're doing. He's an inside zone machine. He's a great athlete. He's a big guy. My prediction right now, he's going to be a Pro Bowler this year, and you're going to see why pretty early on. He's a really, really good football player. They got him on a steal, in my opinion. I think he could have gotten, if there was a better, this sounds weird, but because the fit was so perfect, it only made sense for both sides to make this deal. That probably shaved a few million off of it. Steelers get the better end of that just because it's easy to go and say, look, you do everything that we're going to do perfectly. Therefore, you don't have a better opportunity anywhere else in the NFL. Sign this contract. You're going to be in at least one Pro Bowl in a Steelers uniform. What number do you want to wear? That's an easy sales pitch. I don't think it was all that difficult. I think that Seumalo probably, wanted to get some market feedback on that price. Worked out very well. But they've got great depth at guard now, because it's not as if James Daniels, a guy that's paid very similarly to what Seumalo was just paid from last season. That's a good 3-guard set. Now, you don't want to plan for injury. That's not the most inspiring thing to tell your team why it is you can't sign somebody else, because you just spent a bunch of money on a backup in case somebody gets hurt. You don't really want to do that. But my point in all of this is they established depth. They established versatility along their offensive line. And that was before the draft. You still have Chuks Okorafor at right tackle, who, great athlete in and of himself, probably not his best season last season, but I don't think anybody in the offensive line had their best season last season. He's got a step or two forward I think he probably needs to make. But the fact that you bring in Jones, I'm going to assume he's going to start day one, because he needs a lot of work. They're going to throw him out there. They're going to show him how to go about his business. He's going to start day one. That makes Dan Moore a swing tackle. They've had Dan Moore playing that third tight end in jumbo packages before. It works out pretty well. They have depth on their offensive line. They can handle an absence for one reason or another. But more than anything, they have the talent. They have the tools to do the work that they're trying to do. That hasn't happened the last couple of years. They've had to patchwork a bunch of stuff together. Do you remember, it was around now a couple of years ago, they had to sign Trey Turner because David DeCastro failed his physical, was going to need another surgery, and they weren't going to pay him what the last year of his contract was scheduled to pay. So they had to overhaul everything on the fly. I mean, think of it like this, and I don't think this is an unfair comparison. You can't change the tire while the car is moving. It's really hard to do that. The Steelers have had to do that on their offensive line the last couple of years. The price that they paid in the past, though, is coming it's getting paid off now. They're able to go free and clear with a really good group of offensive linemen. And they even have an offensive line coach who was there last year. That hasn't happened much in the last 7-8 seasons either. So there's a lot to look forward to on the Steelers offensive line. Very excited about that. The addition of Broderick Jones being the I think the obvious headline. I think functionally what we're going to see is Siamalu making both the left tackle and the center a lot better from his assumed left guard position. James Daniels is going to be a lot more comfortable and ready to go. I think that Okorafor will as well. The whole line got a lot better. We can also add in the weaponry from the tight end position. If we're talking about the versatility of an offense that hasn't really demonstrated that it can be all that explosive, but it can really be confusing to a defense. Pat Freiermuth is developing into a very solid 3-down tight end. Connor Hayward made some plays last year that really should have opened people's eyes as far as his versatility, his athleticism on the field. There's a lot of things that he can do. And then they went out and drafted the beast of all beasts, Darnell Washington, also out of Georgia, just like our boy Brojo. A lot of things that kid can do. I don't think that Freiermuth is still going to get 100 targets. He's still going to be their primary tight end. The different things that they can do in different packages with Washington, with Hayward, maybe with all three of them. The versatility that the offense has now, it grossly exceeds what they've had up to this point the last couple seasons. Plus, going back to the much better offensive line, some continuity along their offensive line. I'm going to get into this in a second. What the Steelers would say at this point is the sky's the limit, which is a cliche. I've been hearing that since I was a reporter. It's funny that they still use that. It's a code to the media that, we're not talking specifics. We're just gonna continue to say the same thing over and over again. It was a Haley staple from back in the day. He told everybody to say that to the media repeatedly. I'm not at sky's the limit, but I will say this. You get 8 games, 12 games, whatever it was from newlywed Kenny Pickett. Congratulations, Kenny, on your marriage. We saw that all throughout social media. He will be a considerably better player than he was last season. And we saw him get noticeably better game to game over the last 4 games. It's pretty rough early. You kind of expected that. You can see Kenny Pickett taking a nice step forward within an offense that's going to be catered more to what they know about him, to what he knows about the NFL now, with a better offensive line, some better option weapons in an RPO kind of heavy offense, which the Steelers will be again. Pickett has the ability to take a nice step forward this season. That makes everything else that I just said accentuate even more. This is a team that they're going to have a lot of guys that can make plays situationally and make them a very difficult football team to beat. Are they going to win you your fantasy league? No. Are they going to have 9 Pro Bowlers? No. We're going to hear all about the Chiefs, Bengals, heavy offensive teams filled with star power. That's not going to be the Steelers. At the same time, though, Steelers are going to be damn tough to beat. To me, that's a 10-win, maybe 11-win season. And that's a huge improvement over what we've seen from them. And it might even equal a playoff win. I don't think there's going to be a team in the AFC that will want to host the Steelers, which is my bet. Probably they're on the road for a wild card playoff game to start things off. I don't think there's a team in the AFC that's going to want to host the Steelers come the end of the season. So I haven't even gotten into the defense yet. We will. Thank you, Mr. Hubbard. I'm going to take this question really quick. I have others lined up as well. Please feel free to ask questions if you would like. I am Neal Coolong. You are listening to the New Standard podcast airing Thursday, June 29th. Why hasn't Joey Porter Jr. signed yet and everyone else has? I didn't read this question. Otherwise, I probably would have ignored it, to be honest with you. He hasn't signed because he hasn't signed. It's a formality nowadays. Honestly, right now, teams typically they're taking vacations. They're not around. It's a question of getting the people that you need together in a building to sign it. The Steelers like to have their people present and make a thing about it. Many of them typically sign leading into rookie minicamp, but it doesn't happen always. It seems like they kind of do them two at a time. Benton and somebody else signed a couple weeks ago, I think. I remember seeing that. It's not a concern. It's a formality at this point. I couldn't give you specifics of why exactly he hasn't, but more often than not, my understanding is it's a question of scheduling. It's really not a major important thing. It's not an ongoing discussion. Though I will say, and I think this is probably why Mr. Donovan Hubbard is asking this question, how exactly you slot Joey Porter Jr. for his salary. He gets kind of the short end of the stick in a way because he was technically the 32nd player taken, but he was a second round pick. Both of those things are true. So when it comes down to his bonus, that's going to go with where he was picked as opposed to the round distinction. But the NFL says the pick that was vacated was the 17th pick of the draft. Porter was drafted with the 32nd pick. It was the 31st player taken. So a little bit of a problem there. Or, excuse me, 33rd pick, right? I knew I shouldn't have gone down this well. Either way, I don't think it's a big deal. A lot of it just comes down to offset bonuses for injury and things like that. Very detailed. It is not a situation where you could expect a holdout of any kind, if that's generally what we're saying. To remind everybody again, I am Neal Coolong. I'm hosting solo today because our leader, the man in arms, Lance Williams, is out on assignment. The CIA has informed me he is somewhere in Western Pennsylvania, opposite end of the world from where Lance usually is. So you know something big is going on. I don't know. Godspeed to Lance. I hope that everything is going well. I wish his family the best as well. You got one question, or not even a question, a comment regarding, seems to be the Steelers receivers. So I want to go into that because I really like what the Steelers have in terms of receivers this year. This was the direct question that I got. Of course, this chose now to reset. Damn it. Is the Steelers wide receiver room better? Room. I love how trendy that's become. The concept of the room. Nobody cared about the room 10 years ago. You know, it's the room itself indicates the depth chart, the players that they have. We don't want to say depth chart anymore. We have to say room. It just sounds cooler. You know, all the guys in the room make the room better. He controls the room. It's experience in the room. The room, yeah, I think it's a lot better. Here's the thing. Starting off with that, let's recognize Deontay Johnson had one of the most statistically unusual seasons, not just in NFL history, but in recent sports history. No one in the NFL has ever come close to 160 targets without scoring a touchdown. No one has ever come close to that. The next closest is like 100. So he was 4 games worth of targets beyond that dubious mark. Okay. Statistically speaking, for you stat heads out there, for you mathematically inclined engineer types, you understand regression to the mean. It's statistically speaking, there is no way he's not going to score touchdowns this year. So in that sense, if he gets the ball, he's going to, that trend is going to reverse. Therefore, he's going to be statistically a more productive player than he was last year. There are things he needs to work on, but there are things, in my opinion, that will naturally come out of all of this. The evolution of the offense, the versatility that they're going to be able to have, the depth that they're going to be able to play with, all of that will happen, but Johnson is still going to get 150 some odd targets, barring injury, of course. If he gets that, he's going to be more productive. You're going to see him back at a much more statistically viable level. Now, I'm not a fantasy football player, so that's my piece for all you fantasy heads out there. Deontay Johnson's a good guy to bet on this season. The big thing is the production on the field, what that's going to do for the offense. They're going to score more points, almost by that alone. They're going to score more points. Johnson will get the ball in better situations. I think he's going to, learn to zag instead of zig in some situations. That's going to be the difference between, the curl and drop back the way that he does that everybody loves so much. He's going to be able to break a play or two, which he didn't do last season. That's why he didn't score. They're going to have a better deep ball throwing quarterback than they had. Mitch Trubisky is abhorrent throwing the ball deep. Kenny Pickett struggled with that early on. We didn't see the best out of him, but we know in terms of his progression as a player, he's going to be a good deep ball throwing quarterback. He was excellent in college in that regard. The timing is different. The protection is different. He's growing professionally. He's going to improve in that area. And as we've seen, he's fearless. He will chuck it deep. They're going to probably cut him loose a little bit more than they did last year. Those big plays are going to come. That's the biggest challenge with the Steelers offense. And I think the wide receivers are in the best position to fix that. Now, I'm talking about Deontay Johnson. What about George Pickens? George Pickens, one of the more interesting stats that I saw, Bill Barnwell of ESPN wrote this piece based on projections going into the season. He was anticipated to have like a 51% catch rate. He was 10% above that, which has only happened like 5 other times in the game throughout the recording period, which is like back to 2006, which is the passing era really of the NFL. That's a massive indication that Pickens ran shorter stuff, which is true. He caught a reasonable amount of passes for a rookie, but we know that he was held back by a bad quarterback position and bad protection. We're establishing that those things are going to be on the up and up. Much better protection, a better quarterback. Pickens is set to go off. Statistically, the probability of George Pickens having a big season, pretty damn good. Now, it depends on what you want to define as a big season. I think big season for a guy like that, I don't know if 100 catches is in his wheelhouse, but call it 85, call it for 1,200, 1,300, 8 touchdowns. That's a big year. For a second-year receiver, that's a big year. I could see him being on that level. Somebody brought up Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson is exactly what this team needed out of the slot. Now, I lobbied for Juju just because I think Juju Smith-Schuster is a pro's pro kind of receiver. He can play the slot if that's what he wants to do. He's going to do that in New England. I'm not at all surprised. 2 of the longer-lasting, successful coaches in Andy Reid and Bill Belichick signed him when he was available. Not surprised by that at all. He's a very, very smart football player. He's great for the slot for the Steelers. If that wasn't viable, Allen Robinson's a pretty nice consolation prize if he's healthy. Big question mark with that. We don't know. It seems like he's healthy, obviously. They'll as Tomlin would say, ride him until he breaks. I'm fine with that. A good veteran slot presence is only going to help everything else that they have. That's going to open up other things. Again, not talking fantasy football here. I don't care about fantasy football. As far as the progression of the offense, Robinson is an integral strategic piece to what they're trying to do. Their 3 main targets most of their targets are going to go to Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth. Okay, Allen Robinson is not there to catch 100 balls. It's not going to happen. Najee Harris is probably going to be 4th. So that's your passing offense. How do you set those guys up? That's really what this is about. Can you do that? Can you implement a system in which these guys can feed off of each other and the quarterback is aware of what's going on? That brings me to my next point, and I know how controversial this is. Matt Canada has never had a better opportunity than he has with this team. And to some degree, he might not ever have a better opportunity, because if this doesn't work, he's not going to be there. What can he get out of it? How much run can he get out of the versatility that he has? This is supposed to be his MO. He's supposed to be scheming up stuff to make everything better. I haven't seen that in 2 years. More than anything, what I don't see is setups among receivers. We don't see combinations. We don't see option routes. There's a lot of bland, boring stuff going on within their passing game. How can they use each other to set each other up better? That's really what this is about. The end of the Randy Fichtner era was, cross and drag, short stuff, looking to extend after the catch. Canada didn't even do that, it seemed, for the most part. And he had a bum quarterback for the first part of the year, and then he had a rookie for most of the year. He doesn't have that problem anymore. This should theoretically be fixed. This is something that we should see early on. They should be running twin combos. They should be running stuff off of each other. If I don't see that consistently early, I'm going to be very, very disappointed. And I don't think the offense will work as well as it should. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Now, I know how crazy that is. It's unreasonable. Matt Canada needs to be drug out, strapped to the rail, and sent upstream. I get it. We'll see. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because, frankly, while I will never learn as much as Matt Canada will learn today about the game of football, there is no tangible or rational excuse to not having more modern route calling, more modern instruction and teaching within your receiver group. No excuse. Okay, I'm done with it. We need to see that early and often this year. I like the wide receiver group. Those three alone. I saw Anthony Miller tweet something to the effect of, well, it's been great, Pittsburgh, thanks, something like that a couple weeks ago. I assume that means his release is inevitable. Miller's a player that's been with them the last couple of years. Injuries have kind of held him back. I am guessing after minicamp, if they are looking to release Miller, that probably means they like what they have with Calvin Austin. He's healthy. He knows enough of what he's doing. They're ready to go with him. Good outlet guy. Maybe he's a return man. I'm not sure, because the only reason Gunnar Olszewski right now is still on the team is the possibility of needing him to go back to returning punts. As scary of a proposition as that is from what we saw last year, you could be looking at the release of both of them, kind of the promotion of Austin, and the retention of Miles Boykin, who's probably just going to be a deep receiver, primary special teams guy. That's probably your depth chart at receiver. That's your room among wide receivers. That's not bad. I like what they have with that. Thank you for that question. What do you think of the former Steelers on the Stallions? Jay Sternberger, Derwin Gray, Deion Kane. Boy, these are sightings Hall of Fame guys. I think if here's what's interesting right now, and I've had this conversation with a couple people recently. This is the best time in pro football history to be a fringe, low-level player. The practice squad, because of COVID, but teams have kept it since, the practice squad has increased, 160% or something like that? Far more opportunities day to day. The rules were relaxed on guys that can be kept on the practice squad, how many times they can be elevated. All of those very much benefit very deep, specific, role-centered guys. Along with that, each of the last 5, maybe 6 years now, there's been at least one professional spring league. Now, we're not talking about whether the league itself was successful or Antonio Brown going out and literally not paying his players. Or excuse me, no. He paid his players and then put a request in to withdraw the payments. So he took money from their accounts. Oh, my God. Not a month goes by that guy doesn't make you just shake your head with what is going on. None of it really should be a surprise, though. I mean, this is all kind of the same thing. Anyway, they've had several opportunities to players beyond college. They've had several opportunities to show their worth, to show their value. The Steelers, and without having researched this across the league, I can say the Steelers are very much taking advantage of that. They have 4 or 5 guys from whatever sub-league, XFL, AFL, whatever it's called nowadays, in camp. Now, that doesn't mean that they're solid, that they're going to play, but they're obviously scouting them. They're obviously paying attention to what's going on. So the feeder value, it's almost like these leagues serve as like an extended Senior Bowl in the spring for not just the college players who weren't drafted and not picked up anywhere in the NFL, but veterans like a Jay Sternberger, for example, is probably the best known around the league. I think he's played for like 3 or 4 different teams. Derwin Gray, I don't think he ages. I'm getting him confused probably with somebody else. There was another guy named Derwin or Gray who played on the Steelers offensive line a while ago. But Derwin Gray has been up and down a bunch of different places. He's getting opportunities. These things didn't happen 10, 15 years ago. So I think we're seeing a lot of value from extended competition opportunities. And with that, kind of hope that, you know, the Rock can figure out a way to make money with the XFL, because there's value that's going to come out of that. We're not far away from kind of a return of He Hate Me, an XFL level player who finds his way in the NFL and makes an impact. I hope that happens. I think it's better for everybody. I think it's better for the game. It's more competition. How do I feel about them specifically? I have absolutely no idea. I liked Deion Kane back in the day. I thought he had something. I could see him competing, perhaps, you know, after cuts for a practice squad spot somewhere. He'd be on an NFL roster right now if he was an obvious lock for that competition come training camp, and he's not. So best of luck to them, though. Once a Steeler, always a Steeler. I'm not at a point where I can project who is going to make the team and who isn't. There's a long way to go, but I would say this. Both sides of this exist. This team has been shallow enough the last couple of years that late round / undrafted guys were almost selected because they had to make the team. I don't know if they're in that spot today. I think the Steelers have, in a couple positions, have more competition than they've ever had in some spots. I mean, just look at the defensive line alone. Just with that, wow, this didn't work. We have multiple draft picks that have gone to the defensive line, and they've had multiple signings as well. And when you look at, I mean, you brought in Benton to a group that kept Ogunjobi, which wasn't a surprise. I mean, it's a happy thing. It's a good thing that happened. You weren't necessarily expecting it for the money that he was making, but they made that investment. Their defensive line is stacked. That's easily the deepest, best position on their team. They're going to cut a very good defensive lineman, at least one defensive lineman. As far as the question, sorry, I went off on a tangent about the defensive line. Spencer Anderson, the offensive lineman out of Maryland. I don't know. I have no idea whether he'll make the team, to be honest. I don't know enough about him. And I think their offensive line has the depth that they're looking for. But this is a team also that probably wants to go back to the time where they had practice squad guys developing that they projected to be starters in a year or two. The depth that they had under Mike Munchak saved them a lot of money and kept continuity to a pretty strong degree over a 3-4 year period. That's a very valuable asset for them. I hope that they can get back to that. Yes, I have also heard stuff along these lines that Nate Herbig, or as Lance would call him, Shebig, would be a backup center. Okay. I mean, I can't say yay or nay to that. I think, though, that you don't sign a backup center to a $4 million contract. You sign J.C. Hassenauer for $25 an hour. It's not going to be his only role. He's going to be the all-around interior versatile backup, which is always a role that they have. Usually they draft them. They don't usually sign free agents at that price. But, hey, if you need it, you need it. I agree. I think Andy Weidel brings that perspective from Philadelphia that had a spoil of riches among their offensive line. develop all of them, because in the future it's going to pay off when you don't have to go out and sign James Daniels $8 million a season, then Isaac Ciamolo at $8 million, $9 million a season, and draft Broderick Jones, because you have these guys backed up. It saves you time, it saves you money, and they're plug and play. They know everything that you're doing. Continuity, very valuable. I think that's more it for that for Herbig. If he's a backup center, great. Maybe he replaces Mason Cole next year. I wouldn't think that Cole would be a guy to replace this year, but I don't know. We've seen things like that happen before. I like Cole. I think Cole does pretty well. This one comes up a lot. How many yards will Najee Harris have this season? You hear that on the surface. Naturally, you think rushing yards. I don't think even Najee Harris, I don't think really any running back in the NFL now is fairly viewed as nothing but a runner. A running back, as in takes a handoff, runs behind the line. I think you have to look at running backs now as their total yards from scrimmage, both as an indication of how effective they are, but also their real value in comparison to their peers around the league. If you can't generate offense in the passing game, you're useless in the NFL today. And you wouldn't have been drafted in the first round. With Najee, here would be my guess. I think he's going to be, barring injury, we can never plan for injury. Barring injury, I think he's going to be a 250 plus carry guy, though asterisk on that, because I've been assaulted by many Steelers fans over this. I really don't think there's a whole lot of difference between Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. As a technical runner, I really don't think there's much difference between the two. And if anything, Warren is the more explosive runner, and that's not even debatable. Warren can go off for 15, 20 yards. You really don't see Harris doing that often. Offensive line, blah, 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 blah. We'll see. Just watch. Harris, though, will be the primary guy, one of the few teams left that really want to feature one running back in an offense. With Warren, diving in there here and there. For Harris this season, I really think 1,200 yards on 250 carries would be a phenomenal year for him. In order for him to get that, he's going to have to break some 20 plus carries. I don't know how many of those he's going to get. We'll see. I like the Lions' chances of getting him 10, but he's not a guy that's breaking dudes in the secondary's ankles to pick up another 10, 15 yards or even bust a 40-yard run. Doesn't do that very often. So to me, I think 1,200 yards rushing would be excellent. And add him for 400, maybe 500 receiving yards. That might be optimistic. It's kind of hard to gauge. You're not really sure where Harris, the running back, fits within this offense. If it were me, you got to mix it up, but I'd want to throw to Warren more than I would Harris, to be honest. What did Harris have last season? Receiving, you're looking at 229 yards on 53 targets, 41 catches. Not much. You need to increase that quite a bit. At the same time, here's Jaylen Warren with 214 yards on 33 targets. So 20 fewer passes were thrown to him, and he had roughly the same amount of yards. You're talking a 2-yard difference in average per catch. 7.6 for Warren, 5.6 for Harris. Add in the fact that you've got versatility among 3 tight ends. Do you need the running back on the field for some of this stuff? Can you put Connor Hayward back there, let him do these things? You got a lot of options. That might kind of dilute the target pool for everybody, but I like what they have. Maybe I'll walk this back. Maybe I'll say 1,200 and 300 for Harris this year. 1,500 yards from scrimmage is a nice season. I'm not gonna cry about that at all. I will caution people, if and when this happens, that's a pretty nice output for the 22nd overall pick of a draft. All right. Nobody thought he was going to be LaDainian Tomlinson except for Steelers fans. That's the fault of Steelers fans. That's not the fault of Najee Harris. It's not the fault of the front office. He's doing what he was selected to do. Anybody who thought he was going to be more than that didn't know him very well, didn't understand what they had drafted. He is a good running back. He is not a phenomenal one. He's not a great one. He doesn't do anything exceptionally well. He does a lot of things pretty well. He's not a great running back. He just isn't. I like him. He's a good kid. I think he's going to be a big part of success here, but he's not taking over games. He's not going to run for 5.5 a carry. He's not going to have 2,000 yards from scrimmage. He's just not good enough to do that. And the bulk of that is he's not explosive enough. Quick feet. This is why he's a good inside zone runner. His quick feet, good tight vision. He's seeing things a lot better than he did when he started, but he's not going to win a game on his own. He's not going to be the man. If he leads the league in rushing, it's because no one else ran for better than 1,200 yards. I really don't think he's better than that. 4.5 a carry is a high water mark for him. If he can hit that, that'd be great. It's going to be somewhere in there, though. Pretty good. If he goes to a Pro Bowl, I'm not going to gush with praise over that. Not at that position in this league where he only really has 5 peers that are going to get the ball as much as he is. He's probably the worst of those 5. So I hope he does well. I don't have an issue with the pick. I don't have an issue with the idea that, they're going to have to tag him or let him walk after 5 years. I think 5 years is a good amount of time to be a consistent player in the NFL. So I'm good with that. I'm good with Najee Harris. We'll take a couple more here. I wanted to get back to this just because I found it funny. Cam Hayward talked about Najee Harris, about Calvin Austin, Steelers offense as a whole, and he dropped the classic cliche, sky's the limit. I was in the Steelers locker room. I won't say what year, but I overheard a certain group saying that largely implying that basically they were told to use the phrase sky's the limit to describe their offense. Not like a personal motto, but that's just the best way to describe it. Very bland, very vanilla. It's funny to hear Cam Hayward still using it because it was a while ago. Cam was still a young player back when that happened. But I am excited about this offense. I'm not at a point where I would say sky is the limit as if this is Ben under center with Brown and Bell, maybe Martavis Bryant to some degree, Heath Miller. They don't have that kind of explosive potential, but they've got a lot of good players that can do a lot of things on the field. And a lot of this is really going to come down to Matt Canada's ability to expand the young guardrailed offensive scheme for the newer players, the younger players, and get more out of them than what we've seen. I'm one of the few that are willing to say, okay, I see where he's coming from. I see why he's doing the things that he's doing. That's got to change, though, because now you don't have an excuse. You have your quarterback in camp. He's not challenged. There's no controversy surrounding it. What needs to happen for them all to get better? They have to be more complex and intricate with routes. When I say a route combination, I mean you're running things off one another to make defenses not guess, but they have to choose. They have to be very disciplined to cover everything that's coming at them. Right now, what we saw last year and really the year before that as well, receivers are running in isolation. What George Pickens did had nothing to do with what Deontay Johnson did. Pat Freiermuth was not doing anything off of either one of them. They weren't working in concert with one another. That's a more modern offensive strategy. Option routes are harder for young quarterbacks to get right with the receiver. There's a time period that you kind of need to get used to that. What you're seeing, in other words, Pickett and Pickens, let's say, are looking at the same field. They're looking at the same defense. Based on that pre-snap read, they have to be in sync with what they're seeing. In other words, if this guy's inside technique, I want you to run this route. That's an option. Based on what the defense is doing, that's what the receiver is going to do. But the receiver and the quarterback have to be 100% correct every time they run those. A newer quarterback with a rookie receiver, you probably don't want to do a whole lot of that. I hope that type of chemistry has been developed. I hope that there's more confidence in their ability to do that. And frankly, I hope that the quarterback and the receiver are able to read a defense well enough to implement those kinds of things. They need that. That's why they don't have explosive plays. They're not hard to plan for, and they haven't been. That's why their offense isn't very successful. I don't know how much more they could have done. They need to develop this, though. I really hope that was a primary component of their off season. I didn't pause for station identification at all. This is the New Standard Podcast. I am your solo host today, Neal Coolong. I'm probably going to wrap this up here. I'm not sure how much more I can go. At a little bit of a late start here, but I want to thank you all for listening, for watching, for bearing with us while Lance is out on assignment in Western Pennsylvania. We should be back for the first time. God, it feels like 2 months we've done a show together. This is the exciting, boring period of it because it's coming up. You know, after the 4th of July, it's pretty dry for a good 2 weeks, but all of a sudden, boom, you got training camp right on top of you. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great season. We are planning to continue with this show the way that we have for the last 2 seasons, and we both think this will be, without question, the best of those 3 seasons. Again, I'm Neal Coolong. You've been listening to the New Standard Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week. Regular bat time, regular bat channel, which is Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. Thank you all. Have a happy and safe 4th of July weekend. Protect yourselves. Stay out of the sun. Don't drink too much. Be safe. Come back and join us next week. Thanks, guys.